May I shake your hand, sir? First, show them that's the unit. Show everybody. This is the first step to change. We're here together. We're not here against each other. Thank you for being here. Sir, may I shake your hand, please? Sir, may I shake your hand?
For those of you who are listening on podcast, this is going to be unintelligible, but we're watching a video of a Canadian man offering to shake the hands of police who are protecting against the carbon tax protests up in Canada. And what we're looking at is basically a line of stormtroopers, militarized police force, who have been mandated to and are carrying out the orders of protecting the public by crushing any form of peaceful protest that Canadians still have the right to engage in. Everybody, and there's a longer purpose to that post. I should have shared it with everybody, actually. It's on my Twitter feed. Go check it out. Go give it a share, because what you're witnessing is, in real time, how good people can do bad things. I don't presume all of those people are necessarily evil. I appreciate that they're police and they're intended to maintain law and order. But when the police don't protect the people, but protect the government, you no longer have democracy. What you have right there is tyranny. And I was going to make the cheeky, cynical comment that this is what, the modern day Gestapo looks like. The only problem is the Gestapo was Hitler's secret police. These stormtroopers are not secret police anymore. They come in during the Ottawa protest and they bust skulls, literally. Pepper spray veterans, arrest veterans, physically assault peaceful protesters. They do it in plain light. CBC accidentally covers it, and then that video of the RCMP or whoever it was, kneeing a veteran like they were a sack of potatoes. Well, that video gets quickly removed and gets quickly flagged on YouTube. They're no longer doing it in secret. They're doing it proudly, serving the government and not serving the people. And that gentleman was just walking around saying, hey, shake my hand. We're in this together. And I understand it's totally unrealistic, but the image that generated will resonate, and as it should. FTP, I think I know what that means. Everybody, this is going to be a good one. This is a man that I've been following now for following the story of, never met, never spoken to Viva Voce until 1 minute before this stream. Tommy Robinson, public enemy number one. I want to say that Tommy Robinson is like the UK or the British, the European version of Alex Jones. I say that only because that's my learning curve with Tommy Robinson. I remember what I thought I knew about Alex Jones. I remember what the media said about Alex Jones. I remember the treatment that Alex Jones got. I remember what the media said about Tommy Robinson. I remember the treatment that Tommy Robinson got. I got interested in it from a merely legal perspective. How the hell does a man get convicted of contempt, sentenced to 13 months in jail within the same day in any country that doesn't start with North and end with Korea, or start with, I don't know, I want to say Russia, but I think in Russia they have more due process. So I've been following Tommy Robinson's story for years. And I think I have discovered that the people, the media, go out of their way to slander and defame the most as the villains, ironically enough, more often than not, or statistically improbably, end up being the heroes and not the villains. And I'm not like, I'm going to meet Tommy. I've been listening to a lot of his stuff. I know a lot of his story. He's a controversial man, and whatever that means these days. The most hated and the most loved man in the UK. And I've got 90 minutes with him, so I'm not going to waste any more time on this intro. Tommy, I'm bringing you in. Everybody, you're going to tell me if the audio levels are good. Sir, how goes the battle?
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well as well. I'm good. I'm very well.
Tommy, like I've been following you for years. You probably didn't know I existed until relatively recently. And I've had thousands and thousands of questions that I'm going to boil down now. People say Locals is not streaming. Sorry, Tommy, give me 1 second to fix a problem here. Yeah, we're definitely going to make sure we're streaming on Locals. And I think I know the problem is that I'm an idiot. Edit. Going to add one link right here. Sorry about that, everybody. And sorry, Tommy. Well, while I do this, Tommy, 30,000 foot overview for anybody who might not know who you are.
I am. So I grown up in a town 30 miles north of London called Luton town. When I was born in 1982, we had one mosque. We've now got 45. So I've seen and lived the experience of Islamic domination of your town. My town, white English are a minority in my hometown. In 2009, during a soldiers' homecoming parade, the soldiers were given the freedom of the city on their return from duty, and they were attacked by Muslim protesters who spat in their mums' faces, called them butchers of Basra. In response to that, and not just that, but a long history of witnessing two-tier policing, witnessing Islamic radicalisation out of control, I formed an organisation called the English Defence League. We went from city to city, protesting and highlighting on the streets in our thousands issues which were being ignored, which the general public were too fearful to talk about. Remember that they had managed to paralyse our entire country through the fear of being branded racist for 30 years. So every issue had been hidden, had been brushed under the carpet, and then come along the English Defence League like that, straight into the public domain, and started screaming about these issues. We went from city to city. We travelled for 5 years. We literally held a road show, highlighting issues. And a lot of the issues, remember this is 2009, the issues I started talking about, which we were using our platform to highlight. This was before people were having these discussions. It was before really the blowing up of social media. So the public sphere to have these discussions was in town centres with thousands of people from those towns listening. So we were going to the town centres and talking about the issues to do with rape, jihad, groups of Muslim men targeting young girls in English cities across this country that no one was talking about. That's a basic. I then left my street activism in 2015 and I turned my hand to journalism. And I've since made probably 10 feature-length films. I now act as a journalist and work as a journalist. And I continue to shine a light on corruption and issues that people or government want to hide. And they're usually issues to do with open border immigration.
All right, now not to get too far into the past, I know that your mum is Irish. You're the son of, are both your parents immigrants to the UK or to England?
No, my mum's Irish. My real dad was English. I was brought up by a Scottish man who I say is my dad. So yeah, my mum was one of 8 children. When she come to Luton, it was no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. Those were signs on the doors at the time. Luton is a melting pot for every culture, every community. Everyone pretty much is the sons of immigrants. And I talk about the experience of that and how all those communities that come into the town pretty much got on pretty well, apart from one. One section of the town has failed to integrate, failed to assimilate. And I just talked about things through my vision of my hometown of Luton. That was the Islamic community. When I went to school, you had the Muslim playground and the non-Muslim playground. There was never racial lines or racial divisions. It was always religious. So that's what I talk about. But yeah, my mum was one of 8. I've had a working class upbringing. Luton, so people understand the town, is rated as the roughest town in the UK. It's not a great place. It's got a lot of problems to do with poverty, to do with criminality. Yeah, so I talk about those experiences. And unfortunately, with the class system in the UK and a lot of our classist journalists or classist politicians, they don't want to hear it from someone like me.
Well, so, and how many siblings do you have?
I have one.
All right. Now, so you're born and raised in Luton. I was looking into it a little bit. I'm a Canadian bumpkin. I've never really grown up in a rough town. Has Luton always been relatively rough? And if so, what made it rough back in the day versus what makes it rough in today's time? Because I think rough towns, I think Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, Snatch, and all of these great British films. But I have no personal or direct experience with any of this, of what it looks like.
Luton's always been a rough and violent town. Probably to do with poverty, probably to do with its location, mentality. What you grow up thinking is normal, you then realise isn't normal. The way to deal with things, the level of violence, whether it even just be at school, everything was solved with violence, and that become a normality in my life of believing how you grow up and how you earn respect or how you defend yourself. But then Luton has been taken over by Islam. Totally taken over. As I said, 45 mosques. Luton was named by the American CIA as the epicenter for terrorist activity. It was a launch pad for the fertilizer bomb plot, the 7/7 bomb plot in London. They got their bombs in Luton. The Stockholm bomber, the fertilizer bomb plot. All of these plots were staged out of Luton. Luton was home to Al-Mujahideen, who are now a proscribed terrorist organisation, but they weren't. That's Omar Bakri, Abu Hamza with a hook. Their head office of their operation was in Biscuit Road, which is a town that's actually where my auntie lives. Yeah? So we grew up becoming accustomed to knowing who these men were.
I'll ask a stupid question. why Luton? How did it end up being the place where a certain demographic was landing and coming to live?
I'd say because of Vauxhall Motors. We were the home of Vauxhall Motors in the UK, and a lot of the original Kashmiri Pakistani community would have come for work. Now, the Kashmiri Pakistani community that come to Luton are from a very tribalistic, low IQ, low education area of Pakistan. And we then were set up base for Al Mujahideen, for extremist organisations. The Gulf, when I speak to the elders in my town, the attitude of the Islamic community changed after the Gulf invasion. It's like the launch for jihad was launched after the Gulf invasion. The radicalisation and the division and the new level of violence brought to the streets come after the Gulf invasion. And then literally, when I say I've spoke about this, I've showed evidence of this. When September the 11th happened in my town, there were celebrations in college. Each year, they marched and paraded and celebrated September 11th. When I went up to my local shops after September 11th, there were magnificent 19 posters all over the place. Yeah, it was a celebration. The extremists, the radical, the jihadists used to have stalls set up every week in my town centre. Outside Don Miller's bakery, Don Miller's just a bakery chain. Outside Don Miller's bakery chain, everyone knew that's where the jihadists were week in, week out. This was before people even knew what jihad was really. Like, this was before the September, before 2004 terrorist attacks. I organised my first demonstration called Ban the Luton Taliban in 2004 when I was 20 years old. And I called it Ban the Luton Taliban because these groups were openly recruiting on the streets of our town and sending them to fight against our armed forces. Our armed forces were suffering and dying in faraway fields, and men who were British men, born in Britain, yeah, they hate Britain, but they were literally on our streets in my town, recruiting, radicalising. So that was my first demonstration I held. The response I received from that was a young man. I received violence. I received my house come under attack. I then received years of battling Pakistani gangs in the town because I decided to speak up. And it wasn't the radical terrorists who come for me. It was all the drug gangs. So that was my first experience of the allegiance between the drug cartels, the Pakistani mafia cartels, and the radical extremists. And I wrote about this in the leaflet. I put out a leaflet in 2004, and I used this in a speech I gave at Oxford University to show people. In that leaflet, I named the gang. Yeah, this is what got me in trouble. I named the gang Gambinos because, and what I said at that time is they use heroin as a weapon against our community. They use heroin to destroy our community. They are attacking racially and religiously motivated attacks against members of our community. And they can attack white people and black people, and they're not getting the full force of the law. They're not being dealt with by the police. The police are afraid of this section of this area of the town. So I spoke about all these things in this leaflet, and I said that they're using drugs to target our daughters, to pimp them as children into prostitution as paedophiles. And so this was the first time. This is now common. Everyone knows this was happening. But when I'd done this in 2004, I probably wasn't ready for the backlash. But as a youngster, I navigated towards the football hooligan scene in England. Yeah, I was a young lad from a working class town. Most of my older relatives were in the football scene. It was a culture. I gravitated towards that. So when I held my demonstration in 2004, there was lots of young lads, English lads like me, who were not willing to back down. And that then exploded into years of problems for me. Years of problems. And then comes around 2009. So this is 2004. Comes around 2009 with the Soldiers' Homecoming Parade. And I just got over all those years of trouble. Yeah. But then with what happened, I was biting my lip because at this point then, I had 7 properties between me and my partner, 2 successful businesses. I was getting on well in life, and then they attacked our soldiers. And I was so desperate to say something and do something, but didn't want the back. I knew what comes with it. And as soon as you talk, they're coming for you. Yeah? So then I used a pseudonym, which is Tommy Robinson. That's not my real name. And people make a big deal of, why did you use a pseudonym?
When I first discovered, what do you? I mean, everybody knows your natural name.
Yes, Stephen. I was born Stephen Yaxley. Yaxley was my birth name from my English dad. Because I didn't see him, I then took on the name Lennon, and it became Yaxley Lennon. And then I got rid of Yaxley totally because if I had children, which I have now, I didn't want them carrying that name. So Stephen Yaxley Lennon. The media always like to remind people it's Stephen Yaxley Lennon. But the only reason I done that is because I knew my house would come under attack. I knew I would face death threats. I knew all these things, but I wanted, and you know what was insane? For 1 year, I wore a mask and used the name Tony Robinson. No one knew who I was. No one knew. Even people, my mum didn't know it was me for the first 6 months. I'm going into studios with a mask on and hiding my identity everywhere and talking about these issues because I was desperate for someone to talk about them. But I was the same, and I fully understand it. You know, with cancel culture now, do you know how many people are out there who are sitting there who are successful, who agree with everything we're saying? They're worried, they're fearful, but they're too scared to say something. I was that person. I was scared. I didn't want to say it, but I was so desperate to talk about it that I used a pseudonym and wore a mask. And after 12 months, the Times newspaper ran a big spread. By this point, we'd travelled the UK, causing a lot of chaos with demonstrations. We were very hard to control as an organization.
Let me do one thing before I ask more questions. We're going to end this on YouTube, and not out of fear of any censorship. I'll post the entire interview afterwards, but because we're going to go to the platform where we favor free speech, onto Rumble. So the link to Rumble is there, everybody. We're going to dive into a little bit of the trouble years because I got some questions about that. Get into the grooming gangs, where that's where I discovered it, and we discovered something that had been going on for years. We'll get into who knew, who didn't, who knew and did nothing, and who knew and did something. So come on over to Rumble. We're ending on YouTube, and we're going to carry on.